I'm Gerhard Lazu, and you're listening to ShipIt.show, a podcast about ops, infrastructure, and deploying straight to production. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of two guests. Whitney Lee, staff technical advocate at VMware, the one behind the Lightning episodes, and Mauricio Salatino, which you already know from episode 41, continuous delivery for Kubernetes. The two of them gave the most amazing KubeCon keynote last month. What a rush! Let's deploy straight to production. So, how do we create an internal development platform that enables anyone on the team to deploy straight to production with the confidence that everything will just work? Big thanks to our partners Fastly and Fly. This MP3 is served with minimal latency from the Fastly Edge location, which is closest to you. Our app and database run on Fly.io because it keeps things simple.
This episode is brought to you by Sourcegraph. With the launch of their Code Insights product, teams can now track what really matters in their code base. Code Insights instantly transforms your code base into a queryable database to create visual dashboards in seconds. And I'm here with Joel Kortler, the product manager of Code Insights for Sourcegraph. Joel, the way teams can use Code Insights seems to pretty much be limitless, but a particular problem every engineering team has is tracking versions of languages or packages. How big of a deal is it actually to track versions for teams?
Yeah, it's a big deal for a couple of reasons. The first is, of course, just compatibility. You don't want things to break when you're testing locally or to break on your CI systems or test systems. You need to have some sort of level of version unification and minimum version supported, and all of that needs to be compatible forward. But the other thing we learned was that for a lot of customers, especially engineering organizations that are pretty established, they have older versions of things, or even older versions of SaaS tools they don't use anymore, that they haven't fully removed because they're not sure if it's still in use, or they lost focus on that. And they're spinning up old virtual machines that they're still paying for, or they're using old SaaS subscriptions they're afraid to cancel because they're not sure if anyone's actually using it. And so getting off of those versions not just saves you the headaches and the risks and the vulnerabilities of being on old versions, but also literally the money of older systems running more slowly, or the build times, or virtual machines and SaaS tools that you're no longer using. Before you had this ability, we talked to teams, there are basically three ways you could do this. You could Slack 1 million people and ask for just an update point in time. You could have sort of one human in one spreadsheet where it's somebody's job every Friday or every 2 weeks to just search all the code and find all the versions and write it down in a Google Sheet. Or there were a couple of companies that I came across with in-house systems that were sort of complicated. You had to know, maybe Kotlin, but you didn't know Kotlin. But if you wanted to use this system, you had to learn Kotlin, and you'd have to sort of build the whole world from scratch and run basically a tool like this with a pretty steep learning curve. And now for all three of those, you could replace it with a single line Sourcegraph search, which is basically just the name of the thing you're trying to track and the version string in the right format. And then we have templates that'll help you get started if you're not sure what that format is. And then it'll automatically track all the different versions for you, both historically. So even if you start using it today, you can see your historical patterns. And then, of course, going forward.
Very cool. Thank you, Joel. So right now there is a treasure trove of insights just waiting for you, living inside your code base right now. Teams are tracking migrations, adoption, deprecations. They're detecting and tracking versions of languages and packages. They're removing or ensuring the removal of security vulnerabilities. They understand their code by team. They can track their code smells and health, and they can visualize configurations and services and so much more with Code Insights. A good next step is to go to about.sourcegraph.com/code-insights. See how other teams are using this awesome feature. Again, about.sourcegraph.com/code-insights. This link is in the show notes.
We are going to ship in 3, 2, 1.
So even though I was not able to attend KubeCon North America this year, I've heard that many people which did had a lot of fun doing so. Apparently, one keynote in particular had a meaningful contribution towards that fun. And deploying straight to production is quite a thrill, that's for sure, but I hear that the keynote was even better than the real thing. So Whitney, welcome to ShipIt.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
And we also have Mauricio. Welcome back to ShipIt.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So Whitney, this was your first KubeCon keynote. How was it for you?
So not only was it my first KubeCon keynote, the very first time I ever even spoke at a conference was only in April of this year. So I've been speaking at conferences for about 6 months. And then the first conference I ever attended, even as an attendee, not even as a speaker, was 1 year ago at KubeCon LA. So this is all, I couldn't have dreamed in a million years that I would be on the keynote stage when I'm thinking about Nervous Whitney, who was at her first conference, who just wanted to make a good impression on people, that I'd be on that big stage.
That's amazing. So what's the secret? I mean, you must have done something very, very good, right? To go from attendee, like in last year, to keynote speaker a year later. How did you manage to do that? What's the secret?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I've been working really hard to, I have a daily study routine and I do my very best and I'm learning at a breakneck pace. Teaming up with Mauricio certainly doesn't hurt anything since he certainly knows his stuff. And then I make a show called Enlightening, so I'm in the public eye a little bit, at least enough to know that I'm pretty natural in front of a camera and that I can articulate ideas well. And maybe, I don't know that, maybe they just made a mistake somehow and I just capitalized on it. That's always a possibility too, right?
I think someone saw through many things and they thought it's going to be amazing because I have watched the video. It came out 3 days ago. I watched it again today and I could not have told that this was your first talk. I really couldn't. No way.
So I played in bands for many years and I toured nationally in a band. So being in front of a pretty big audience is actually, that's not a first for me. Speaking technically in front of a big audience is, but performing in front of one I've done before.
I see. Okay. And Mauricio, it was your first KubeCon keynote too.
It was my first KubeCon keynote. Yes, I was pretty nervous with the opportunity, mostly because...
I've seen your nervousness. I definitely have in the video.
Yeah.
Not Whitney's. No, I haven't.
Not with this.
I haven't.
You
of course I haven't. No, you'd be very confident. Come on, seriously. Like it comes so naturally to you. It comes speaking.
Yeah, but the preparation and the presentation, kind of like the main change, at least in my head, was to realize that when you do a keynote, you do it for like the entire audience of the conference, which is not the same as when you're doing kind of like a session track where you can just target, more the advanced or the intermediate kind of like spectators. And in this case, it needed to be kind of like an encompassing, kind of like a very wide topic covered like very from the high level. And for me, that was definitely the challenge there. But we practiced a lot with Whitney, and I think that actually made a difference.
Nice. What was the feedback like after people watched your talk?
I can't even tell you what talk came after us because as soon as we got finished, we went straight backstage and then we just both looked at our phones and scrolled through Twitter and we're just like, oh my goodness, like I've never had such an experience of immediate feedback and such positive feedback and such warmth and happiness. It made my heart 3 times bigger.
Yeah, for me, I think that, I don't know, after we got a lot of feedback and of course we were being recognized in the conference, which is kind of like a really nice feeling. But also the realization was that we were touching kind of one of the main topics of the conference. There were a lot of people talking about building platforms. And for us to show something in action was pretty big because there were a lot of companies saying, this is pretty much what we are going to. So it's good to see, an example, something that it's running, that it's already implementing some of these things.
I really liked the complexity of the topic and the ease and the simplicity with which you presented it and how simple you made it look. Who was the wizard with the graphics? Because I think that had a huge role to play. Was it Whitney?
I made all of those silly drawings, yes.
I thought that they were amazing. They were very, very nice. I mean, sometimes, and when I say sometimes, I mean most times, we take ourselves too seriously in this industry, and big hats and to cover all the big heads, right? The ones that we think we have, but, they're fairly hollow for many people. Anyways, the point is that we take ourselves too seriously and we shouldn't. Now, would I ship a spider in production? I'm not sure about that, but let's leave that for later, okay? Maybe unicorn, but not a spider on purpose. All right, so I have a very important question. Should developers be able to push straight into production? What do you think, Mauricio?
For me, it's definitely a no. So you need a platform to be taking care of all the things that you need in order to deploy stuff to production. And I see people struggling with that, not with the fact that you are not allowed to push to production, because there are some companies where teams are enabled to do that. So they can actually own their own components and they can own them all the way. And I think that for some companies that might work, but what I'm seeing more and more is the companies trying just to abstract away all the complexity and governance and all the tools that are needed in order to achieve that. And I think that in the CNCF landscape now, more and more tools are popping up in that space, which makes it really attractive for people to not start from scratch, right? Like you do not need to actually define all the things. You can just take from communities that are already building these tools and then just build on top of that.
How are we thinking about that, Whitney, pushing to production?
The more those steps can be automated, the more the developer can have the illusion of pushing straight to production. Like there are tons of checks and balances in there making it feel possible. But in terms of actually straight to production, that's difficult.
And why is that? Why do you think that is a problem? Or if you do that, it's less than ideal. Let's put it that way. It's less than ideal if you push straight into production. Why is that?
Too many things can go wrong. And that's usually not a problem if you have all the mechanisms in place just to go back to like a stable version of your system, right? Or at least the services that you are owning. The problem is that most of the time, having that maturity to make sure that you can quickly recover to avoid like downtime and to avoid like frustrating your users, it's not something that every company have implemented or have kind of like the right mindset or culture just to be in that safe space.
And then when you're trying to push to production, the question becomes too, like, whose concern is that? Like, we're talking about the developer experience in terms of pushing to production, but that's not really what we want the developer to be concerned with at all. We want the developer to focus on application coding, push it to wherever, but they don't even need to think about that part because it's someone else's job to get it the rest of the way to production.
And most of the time, it's about bringing business value, right? So it's more like a business and company-related decision on when to release the stuff. I'm really happy to see more and more automation and tools around like feature flagging for cloud-native applications. It's really nice to see standards popping up in that space because that's going to give you, you can just keep deploying, but then enabling features as you go and turning things off if they are not working correctly.
So if I was to ask you, Whitney, what does the ideal push to production look like? What does that look like to you?
It's such a funny question because whose perspective are we going from? Like
the developer.
From the developer perspective, I mean, which parts do they want to own, I guess? I think it's unique to the team. And as a platform team designing this for an application team, the first step is to ask the application team, what does an ideal experience look like for you, for that particular team? And then for the platform team to enable that experience from there. But it's really important to start with that conversation with the application teams.
Yeah. I would be very interested in seeing kind of like the feedback loop, right? Like even if developers are pushing code or features and they just actually can see which releases are being created with these, changes that they are pushing to the application code, and then getting feedback about when those features are reaching to the production environment, to see how those things are performing or if they are causing issues.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that most people miss, right? They say, we want the ability to push straight into production. I say, great. So when something goes wrong, what would you expect to happen? They say, oh, we want this resiliency thing and we want, like graceful degradation. Okay, so who will build that? Who will know that whatever you're pushing will not take production down? And I say, oh, hang on, I haven't thought about that. You mean I have to do that? Okay, maybe I need some help. I think that's what usually happens. And if you can't take responsibility for what you're about to do, well, you can't have it both ways.
No, and something that we see like a lot of people forgetting most of the time, at least in these kind of conferences when they are doing demos and showing simple examples, is that one thing is reaching to production, but then it's keeping production healthy for the long run, right? And making sure that whatever it's running there, it's running a little bit better than what's running before.
And I think teams also, and especially now, I'm sure churn is on everyone's mind. People coming and going, right? Joining teams and leaving teams. So production, hopefully, will still be around when certain people leave. So it's everyone's problem. So how do we make it everyone's problem in a safe way, in a way that ensures continuity, when specific people leave? Where do we put that knowledge? So there's like the long game to consider. Production doesn't end or start and end with a single person. That would be very bad, very bad.
So to answer that, usually it's like that's where like the concern of the platform, right? Like a platform, it's that box that will basically take care of all these company-wide decisions and policies and governance that basically will be in charge of having all the automation that it's needed to keep production safe and also provide similar environments for developers to try their stuff and just to feel safe when they are deploying new things.
The more you can define and codify that knowledge, the better. Which can be difficult culturally because the people who hold that knowledge, that's how they get their sense of importance somehow. And they don't want it to be defined and codified because that's why they're important to that organization. That's a struggle.
Like, what do you tell to those people that say, no, I don't want to codify this because you won't need me, right?
I guess, I mean, if you could find another way for them to get their sense of importance and have some ownership over maybe doing that piece. But I suppose it depends on the individual. Above my pay grade.
So basically, I think that you can also promise them back their weekends, because if they have everything encoded and automated, they just don't need to work on weekends when things will probably go wrong.
Yeah, or you don't need to use a pager, by the way. If all of these legs are resilient enough and everyone understands how it works, it's not your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Or only your problem, right? We can spread that load. Interesting. Okay. So platform teams, I think it's safe to say that they're here to stay and they're only going to become more important. What happens for small development teams? Let's say there's only 2-3 developers. It's a small team. It's a startup. They don't have a platform team. So how does that work in smaller teams? How do you see platform teams and developer teams and any other teams work in smaller startup, but especially from the platform and the app developer side?
Basically, I would say that they do have a platform, right? Like that's what like cloud providers offer. And that's why startups like make a lot of sense for a startup to say, okay, I will just go and choose one of these, cloud providers because they give me all the tools for me to get started without worrying about like maintaining or running Kubernetes clusters, which is something that you will need teams, like entire teams to manage. On top of that, of course, you can start building your more company-specific set of capabilities. If you choose Google or Amazon or Azure, you will need to start building stuff on top that it's more relevant to your domain. And all of these cloud providers will provide you tooling to create these higher level abstractions and tools.
I actually have a question for Mauricio around getting started with cloud provider services, which makes a lot of sense to use stuff that's provided for you out of the box. But then how can you start that from an angle where you avoid vendor lock-in, you'd avoid depending on that cloud? And if so, how do you do that?
In general, for startups, that's not one concern that they will have because they need to get business value out. They need to build something fast. And for that, it's fine to pay like that vendor lock-in, right? When you go a little bit bigger, when you start growing, that's where kind of like you start thinking about these kind of concerns. And that's where Kubernetes becomes kind of like a good investment because you start breaking up some of these, lock-ins that you have if you jump in a cloud provider. But that's for a little bit larger companies that I would say that can invest a little bit more and have their own teams just to build and maintain stuff.
Hey friends, this episode is brought to you by my friends and potentially your friends too at Fire Hydrant. And I'm here with Robert Ross, founder and CEO of Fire Hydrant. And Robert, there are several options out there for incident management, but what is it that makes Fire Hydrant different?
The reason that we think that Fire Hydrant is onto something is because we're meeting companies really where they are. We face the same problems that every company in the industry that is building and releasing software is also facing. So we want people to be able to sign up for Fire Hydrant and immediately be able to kick off an incident using the best practices that we've built and we've experienced and have gathered through the other amazing customers that use our tool. It really is a very quick time to value. And we want people to have a long jump from where they are to where they want to be in incident management.
I love it. Thank you, Robert. Small teams up to 10 people can get started for free with all Fire Hydrant features included. There's no credit card required to sign up. They are making it too easy to get started, so check them out at firehydrant.com. Again, firehydrant.com.
So when you're a small team, would you recommend starting with Kubernetes or would you recommend elsewhere?
You are asking the tough, very, very tough questions. I would say that, yeah. So I would say that if you're a small team and you want to build a business functionality, starting with the cloud provider is probably the safest bet, right? Like if you're small, you go there, you just build something. It's really also up to kind of like what kind of business. If you are in the software provider kind of like business, or if you're providing software for other companies, definitely look into Kubernetes. If you are more like an end user kind of company, definitely go for a cloud provider and just build functionality first, then re-architect, and then figure it out if you need kind of like some abstractions from your cloud provider.
When you say cloud provider, what do you mean specifically?
When I say cloud provider, I usually mean Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, which are like the biggest ones, yeah.
And then you would pick services, right? Rather than VMs, or that's what you're thinking, right?
Yeah, and for like if you analyze this from a developer perspective, I've seen very different startups that are building functionality, and they look at tools like AWS Lambdas or Google Cloud Run or Azure Functions, I think, because they can quickly create functionality, deploy it, and have it running. And that's really important. To do that with Kubernetes, you go through kind of like a period of learning. And I think that Whitney can tell you a lot about all the amazing projects that we have in the CNCF landscape, that it will take you some time to learn. It's not something that you just read the documentation and then you are using it. You just need to wrap your head around it and then have enough expertise to understand how to use these things and how they will work.
What is the first project that comes to your mind, Whitney, when it comes to solving this problem? So Kubernetes is too much, right? You don't have the time, you don't have the expertise to figure this Kubernetes thing out. What else would you do?
Knative serving is really great to abstract away a lot of the Kubernetes complexity and get a more simplified experience while still being able to utilize all of what Kubernetes has to offer. Okay.
And where do you get Knative serving from? Like, how? I want one. How do I get one?
Knative.dev, I believe, is the project website.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can. It's open source, so you can just download it and use it. There's a great quick start tutorial on the site, so you can learn about how it works. And then not only do you have a more simplified experience where if you're using vanilla Kubernetes, you have to manage a lot of objects, you have to hook them together. You might be looking at 90 to 120 lines of YAML to try to get it all running. You have a 10-line YAML experience of just deploying a Knative service. But then in addition to that, you can do a lot with traffic splitting and you can scale to zero.
Yeah. Hang on. No. In your keynote, you said no YAML and no Docker file. So how do I get that? That's what I want.
That's the Knative Functions project, which I'll hand the ball to Mauricio to talk about it.
Yeah. So, I guess that like in our keynote, we try to show that experience, just trying to build that kind of experience where developers should be focused on writing code. And for that, we use Knative Functions, which basically allows you to quickly bootstrap a project using different programming languages. And then they provide the functionality to just deploy into a Kubernetes cluster without knowing anything about Kubernetes or writing Docker files to containerize the application or YAML files to do the deployments. This is like a very small command line tool, but it's focused in this kind of like a space of functions as a service platforms. And I think that that's something that the more companies get more mature with the use of Kubernetes, they will start looking into this. We keep hearing companies that have a lot of developers that they need to provide these more high-level programming languages so they can allow developers to focus on coding features instead of creating YAML files and just figuring out how to containerize their applications.
When it comes to a managed Knative, Mauricio, what would you recommend? Let's say I don't want that hassle. I just want to go to a cloud provider that gives me a managed Knative or Knative-like experience. What would you, like you yourself, what would you pick?
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? Like Knative is an open source project. It was created by Google, and that's why Google is providing Google Cloud Run, which actually exposes the same APIs as the open source Knative project, which is a pretty important thing. And we hope more cloud providers start offering kind of like these interfaces, because at the end of the day, you are just enabling like your users just to run functions as a service without worrying about who is running Kubernetes or who is actually running the container or where those containers are running. So Google Cloud Run is the closest that you will get as having kind of like a Knative experience. But sometimes managing and installing Knative on your own makes a lot of sense. Mostly if you are the platform team trying to provide your developers like a very custom experience.
The one thing which I really liked about your talk is that there's also some code. I love the pre-recorded demos. I love them. They're my favorite too. That's the way to go, right? Because you're relaxed. The only surprises are the ones that you've put there intentionally, right? So when you pretend something goes wrong, hey, it's a recorded one. But you have code. You've shared code that anyone can take and can try running it. So if you're wondering, how can you get this function experience, this Knative experience without any YAML, any Docker files? There's a repo for that.
Yeah, there is. And I think that we will share this in a link with the podcast probably, yes?
Yes, it'll be in the show notes, yes.
Or in the Twitter as well. But yes, there is a step-by-step tutorial where you can reproduce in your own Kubernetes clusters, even running locally using Kind, the entire demo experience, which basically goes from creating a new development environment, creating, building and deploying a function to that development environment, and finally moving that new function that we created into like a production environment using Argo CD. I think that we try to create a demo that people can run, because we see that maybe when you look at the presentation it looks nice, but when you actually try these tools, you learn a lot, and then you map to your scenarios, to your day-to-day job, all these tools that we are showing.
So even though it's rainbows, it's real, okay? It's rainbows that you can run yourself, okay? That's one of the takeaways. Okay, so it's not just, we're not just talking about this. There's code that you can try out and then see it for real. You can have your own rainbow service. Whose idea was that, by the way, the rainbows part?
Who do you think?
I'm looking at you at a very, very colorful microphone. It looks like a rainbow right now. So I think that's a giveaway right there. Okay. Now, what about spiders? I would have expected unicorns. I mean, they go really well with rainbows. Why spiders? Because I was thinking that you're trying to ship a bug on purpose. I was intrigued. I want to see, like, where does this go? And I was disappointed the bug was just a spider. It was like not an actual bug. So why spider?
I think a spider is literally the opposite of a rainbow. I can't think of any characteristic they have in common. And so I think in terms of just making a silly story where we have an important company that ships Rainbow as a service, they're staying on the cutting edge of technology, and then the cutting edge, surprisingly, is spiders. The Rainbow's connoisseurs, they all of a sudden want to see spiders. It's just keep you on your toes.
For me, rainbows as a service is Twitter.
You said that before.
Yeah, I did before we started recording. I don't know, like, what about the spider? Who's the spider in this story? But the similarity to real life. I mean, I don't think it's a fantasy story.
Elon Musk is the spider. Yeah, Elon Musk is our spider.
Or many bugs are being shipped on purpose. Let's see, like, how well it degrades. Okay. That's an interesting one.
I think that we wanted to draw that parallelisms with the stuff that developers are usually asked to do, right? And we didn't have enough time to show that, but the idea here with all these tools that we show, including Knative and Crossplane and Argo CD, is that you should be able to deploy new stuff that you're not 100% sure that it will work from a business perspective, but you have that flexibility in the platform to switch back, try different things. And then if it's working, you just leave it and move forward. If not, you just revert it back, using a very, simple mechanism.
Being able to see deploys as commits is super powerful. And if you boil down everything that we do to that, right, the way that you can track, you can verify who did what, when, how is this produced, having that full picture, super important. So you still push to production, but not the way you think you do. There's like no CLI involved other than, something that shows you what is happening. Okay, git push, I suppose. But then other things happen behind the scenes.
That's correct. And I think that I'm really hoping that next year message is, so if we keep talking about platforms and if we keep building tools to build these platforms, the things that we mentioned before, when we reach to production, we need to make sure that production stays healthy. So there are like projects kind of like being created on that space. And I think that that's really important. But also if we are building platforms, it would be great that we can measure them from the start, right? Because a platform that doesn't help you to deliver software, it's probably like just the wrong investment. So from the get-go, you start with building platforms, but you can measure how they are performing. And if they are just giving you the value of delivering more software more efficiently, that's a good platform. If not, we are talking about maybe like not a so good platform.
Is there any specific tooling that you would like to give a shout out to? Knative is one of them. We already mentioned it. I think Argo CD was mentioned as well. But is there anything else that you want to give shout outs in terms of a tool that goes very well in the context of a platform?
Yeah, so basically we talk about like vCluster for development environments and ephemeral environments where you can create a cluster that you can store quickly. We talk about Crossplane for provisioning cloud resources as well and providing an API on top of all this complexity, right? Like creating clusters, creating resources in the cloud, installing Helm charts and doing all these things. I think that Crossplane is doing a very good job there. And we didn't mention projects like Keptn for keeping things healthy and just for remediation techniques. But I think that they are doing a great job there as well. And there are a bunch of other projects that are in that space that also, deserve some mention as well.
Any from you, Whitney? Anything that you really like?
He took the words right out of my mouth.
Okay.
But Whitney, you have like a session about build packs and you have a session about Tekton as well, which are also like very, very important projects.
Absolutely. Build packs are part of what's going on under the hood with Knative Functions to get the code into container image in an automated way, and in a way the platform team can control the governance and security around. So that's a really cool project and eliminates the need for Docker files within an organization, or at least greatly reduces it. And Tekton's been around for a while, but it's a pipeline to help you automate pretty much whatever you want. So you define your tasks and they run in a certain order, and it works with Kubernetes APIs.
And it also promotes that idea of sharing constructs, right? Like the idea of enabling platform teams to say, I have my collection of things that are very, like we just reviewed and we know that they work. So we can give developers these pipelines or these blocks that they can use. And I think that that's a pretty powerful message when you're talking about platforms and platform teams.
I'm wondering, is there something in the observability space, something that shows you what is actually happening in production in terms of SLOs, SLIs, anything that you would pick or anything that you liked in your research?
Well, Keptn is one of those tools, I would say.
Okay.
Like Keptn is in that space. And for me, that's the tool that I've been closer to. I know that there are some other tools, but I'm closer to that one.
Okay.
I'm doing an enlightening episode on OpenTelemetry coming up on December 8th. So I purposely fully don't know much about it because I think it makes for a better episode when someone has to kind of explain to me from scratch what their project's about.
Oh, yes.
But I do understand it helps collect data in more of a vendor agnostic way.
Okay. So you mentioned enlightening. For our listeners, Whitney has a show, right? Would you call it a show? A streaming show?
Yeah.
It is. It is fun. It is. There's a whiteboard involved. A glass board. I think that's what you call it. A glass board. You know what?
A light board.
Yeah. Can you please describe it for us? Because I'm doing a bad job. Can you describe enlightening for us, please?
In my home, I have a Lightboard studio. So you may have seen this before. The experience of looking at it is like you're looking at someone who has a black background and then writing with almost glow sticks on that black background and diagramming what they're talking about. So for me, it's an interactive experience. So for Enlightening, I'll have a guest on my show, and they're often a person who represents a certain CNCF projects. So I think literally all the projects we've talked about, BuildPacks, Tekton, Keptn, Crossplane, I've done Enlightening episodes on all of those. So a guest will come on, and then I'm a blank slate. I'm pretty new to tech, as we've established at the beginning. So a guest comes on and teaches me about their technology. And so as I learn from them, I diagram my understanding, and I have an eraser. So if I get it wrong, we get it. But it forces them to explain from scratch, like what's the problem space for why your tool even exists. And then what does your tool do? And then a little bit probably about how it works. And they explain that to me, and I draw it out, and I ask lots of clarifying questions. The chat's always really amazing and fun, and they'll have questions too. And it makes it a really fun show. Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty shocking experience for like people that has been in the industry for quite a while, because, for example, I did an episode on Knative eventing, and then you start realizing that if you want to explain these tools from scratch, there is a lot of background that you need to cover in order to actually explain why these tools were designed and what kind of like problems are they trying to solve. And sometimes those problems are very specific to the use cases or very specific to the tools that you are building. But it's pretty interesting when you see the show and you actually see the person who is trying to explain go through all that background, maybe quickly, in order to get to the point where they can start talking about the project. And that tells a lot about the industry that we are working in, because there is a lot of things going on.
That's very interesting. So there's something which I'm only just connecting now. What was the experience like for you, Whitney, coming into this industry with all those nerds that assume that everyone knows what they're talking about, right? You're like, no, hang on. And the question, even though it may seem naive, there's a lot of importance to them, right? Because people make so many assumptions. And when you have this fresh pair of eyes perspective, it can be so enlightening. So what was it like for you? What was your experience like, Whitney?
It was absolutely overwhelming to try to untangle even the basics. Yeah, I remember first learning Kubernetes, and I didn't understand that a box and a VM and a machine are all the same thing, and a node. They all are the same thing, and they all just mean a computer. Like, why can't we just say computer? Like, all the different words we use for one thing. Additionally, if you talk about manifest files or configuration files or definition files, like, they're also all the same thing, but we use these words interchangeably. And now it's almost like learning a whole new language. And now I speak the language, but I try to not, like, if on the show, if anyone ever says an acronym, even if it feels like a really obvious acronym to me at this point, I always take the time to say what it means. Yeah. I do my best not to get so deep that I forget my roots and start to make those assumptions myself. But it's overwhelming to jump into the space for sure.
And that was all part of the keynote preparation, right? We need to think actually on language that was being used across multiple projects to deliver a very complex message in a simple way. That's kind of like one of Whitney's superpower, right? Like, she can take a very complicated message and actually make it accessible to people. But this was a very complex message. There were a lot of tools that we wanted to show. And then there was like limited time to explain all these things. And again, we need to cover some background and then just go deeper into the message that we were trying to deliver.
I've seen many presentations of yours, Mauricio, and now I understand why this one was the best.
Good. Thank you very much.
Your demos are great, right? But this one was so like nice and simple and, fun, right? Whitney, you made it fun and you made it accessible. I think that's very important. We forget, again, we take ourselves too seriously, right? Spiders mean a bad thing. Well, they do, but they're also fun. They only have 6 legs. No, they're 12. Anyways, things like that.
The spider's smiling, and it's a smiling
It is a
spider.
friendly spider, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, going back to enlightening, do you know which was my favorite feature of the show?
Is it the dancing at the end?
It's the eraser. It makes such a lovely noise.
eraser?
Exactly, yeah. It's like, so I wish we could do that with code, right? Whenever you make a mistake, you can rub it off and you can hear it. And it's like, oh, it's so like the satisfaction to cleaning something. Oh, it's a mistake. Sorry about that.
The squeaky little glass noise.
Yeah, the squeaky one. That was a good one. I really liked it.
I think it's important to be able to easily erase and to ask questions that are like, this may seem obvious, but there's something I'm not quite understanding here about. Yeah, I definitely ask some pretty silly questions. If I rewatch old episodes, I'm like, ooh, okay, yeah. But
there's another silly question coming your way, Whitney. How do you go from a light board to skydiving? How do you do that? Okay, this is very extreme.
Do you know, I did a tandem skydive this past Saturday, and in terms of adrenaline or just like my heart rate getting up, the keynote was 100 times scarier than the skydiving. Like 1,000 times. The skydiving wasn't even on the radar. And Part of that is just like, I think I maybe trust the world. Like, it wouldn't be a good business model to let me jump out of the sky with zero training if it was actually really very risky. But with the keynote, I could very easily visualize a lot of ways it could terribly go wrong and affect my life negatively for the foreseeable future. So that's so much scarier to do the keynote than skydiving.
The skydiving looked a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
It was very fun.
Mauricio, when are you doing skydiving? Because I want to do it after seeing that short video.
Definitely not my thing.
You're not doing that. Okay.
No, not of that. And and keynotes maybe at some point, but it was a pretty intense experience. Yeah, definitely.
So I have a silly question for you too. How much heavier is your laptop with all the stickers on it? Did you measure it before and after? Did you weigh it before and after?
It is pretty heavy. I think that now it has like 2 layers.
You've like doubled, exactly. You've like doubled its weight. Okay.
Totally, yeah.
Does it have stickers on the bottom?
Not yet, but that's something that I was planning to do too.
Okay.
If I was a project and it had a sticker on the bottom of your laptop, I might get my feelings hurt a little bit.
You think so?
I don't.
Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah. But I think that's like the important stuff, right? You consider that the boring infrastructure, the things that you just like, sustains everything else. I think Kubernetes should go on the bottom because at this point, everything is built on top of it, right?
That's true. That's so true.
So we talked about tech quite a bit. We talked about, I think, people to some extent. I think we touched up on process as well. But I'm wondering if there is some combination of all three perspectives that make what we build in the cloud native landscape so interesting. Because I haven't seen such a good combination of people, tech, and process in a way that is accessible, in a way that is friendly, and in a way that works when put together. Like, I haven't seen any other combination of these things work as well as the cloud native space has. So what is your perspective on that? Why do you think the space where we operate in, this tech space, but it's a very specific tech space, why do you think it works so well? What do you think is its secret?
I appreciate as a newcomer how inclusive CNCF community is and how loud they are about how inclusive they are. So being a beginner, I jumped into SIG Docs and tried to contribute to Kubernetes, and I did. I updated the glossary to help make things more clear, and I felt very warmly received. I had a lot of tools given to me to help me be successful. I felt safe asking my silly questions, of which there are always many coming from me. And that makes such a huge difference to not have your big egos or not have certain people take up too much space, to not leave room for people who are coming in.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that the people is definitely making a difference. Also, like the companies that are getting involved and the fact that the foundation and the projects that are in there are becoming in some way standard in some way. Like that's kind of like what companies are looking to use and to save money and to basically justify their investments. So I think that all these things combined together and all the amazing stuff that is being built, it's just generating this buzz that it's bringing more people, bringing more companies, bringing more investment into the space. And you can see very large companies like actually recognizing now that they need to go there, they need to get closer to these projects, these other companies that are building stuff, because building things in isolation nowadays doesn't make much more sense.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This episode is brought to you by Sentry. Build better software faster, diagnose, fix, and optimize the performance of your code. More than 1 million developers and 68,000 organizations already use Sentry, and that includes us. Here's the easiest way to try Sentry. Head to sentry.io/demo/sandbox. That is a fully functional version of Sentry that you can poke at. And best of all, our listeners get the team plan for free for 3 months. Head to Sentry.io and use the code SHIPIT when you sign up. Again, Sentry.io and use the code SHIPIT.
As I mentioned at the beginning, I was not able to join KubeCon North America this edition. What was that like for you? What was the experience like? How was it different from other KubeCons, from other conferences?
I can't speak for Mauricio, but I was so stressed about the keynotes that I attended almost nothing socially leading up to the keynote. Like, I was very intent on my own headspace, like in well-being and physical and mental health, so that I could be the best person I could be on Thursday morning. After that, I had a lot of fun, but I a little bit had my head under a rock for the first half of it.
Yeah, for me, I think that this time, personally, I met a lot of good mentors and people that were willing to share advice. And reaching to a point in my career where, like when you do like a keynote, then you think that maybe you start like not finding the right things to keep learning or the right people just to keep learning from. And in this case, I met a lot of people that I really respect and value as mentors and as people that I can learn from. And at the same time, I actually realized that there was I was being connected with people that was looking for the same. So I started talking with people and guiding people in certain areas. And it felt really rewarding from both sides, like finding mentors and also mentoring other people.
Any people that you want to give a shout out to? Either of you?
There are too many. I have a blog post about KubeCon NA where I'm just mentioning all the folks that I met and the ones that actually made a very strong mark on my experience there at KubeCon. There are too many, to be honest. All the co-chairs of the conference and all the organizers, definitely there.
One thing that's so cool about KubeCon, for me at least, is that I interact with a lot of people from a lot of different communities from all over the globe. And then to have everyone together in the same space and time and just like be around and just walk it, like your friends who you only ever know online, when you see them in real life, it feels almost like seeing a celebrity or something. You like, oh my God, it's you, and like hugs, and like you do have a physical form. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's not just the head. There's more to it. Okay. Nice. So Whitney, I want to go very quickly one last time back to Enlightening. Is there a recent Enlightening talk episode that you think is a must-see for people that maybe haven't seen Enlightening?
Oh, where to start for a good episode to dig in on? The one I did right before KubeCon was on Captain, and that's related to our talk today. So that one I recommend. Mauricio and I did one together, as he mentioned, about Knative eventing, and that was one of the more advanced things I covered, I would say. And another thing we've talked about today so there's a Knative serving episode, but also Cloud Native build packs is interesting. The thing about the Cloud Native build packs episode is Cloud Native build packs are really easy to use. The experience of using them is like so simple, but knowing how they work is actually very complex. So in that episode, we untangle exactly everything about how they work. So maybe you don't need or want to know that level of complexity around Cloud Native build packs, but if you're interested, I think it's a really fun episode.
Okay.
Oh, and Argo CD. One more. Argo CD was great
too. Okay. We will try to put them all in the show notes. That's a very nice list. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you.
I choose Argo CD up at the top.
Okay, excellent. That will be the first one that I'll list in the show notes. Cool. Mauricio, we talked earlier this year about Continuous Delivery for Kubernetes, the book that you're writing, the Manning book that you're writing. How is that coming along?
That's coming along pretty well. I'm writing the last...
Did you have time for it? Did you have, with all the conferences and everything, I don't think you had much time for it.
It's pretty wild, but I'm actually writing the last chapter now. And it's all about that, like the thing that we mentioned before, measuring platforms and how do we use, for example, DORA metrics to measure performance on software delivery. So I'm currently building a small POC that will go with the book, some tutorial that basically you can just create some sort of way of calculating these metrics on top of a Kubernetes solution. And that's been an interesting thing because, again, as most of the things that I'm working today, they involve different communities and the collaboration between different groups. So I'm really looking forward to finish that chapter because it has been a lot of work, but also because it will have something that you can actually try on your own.
So does it mean that V1 is almost finished of the book?
V1 should be pretty close to be finished by January this next year.
2023. Okay.
It has been a long time in the making, but...
When you say finished, do you mean your part's finished, or do you mean it's available to the public?
So it's already available in the early access program, right? Like you can access the draft of all the chapters, but I guess that the deadline here that we are talking about is to having it printed. And that will happen after I finish my parts, of course, and after like a long review process. So I'm hoping that January I finish my part, and then the review process, and then the printing goes there like early 2023.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is summer 2023, knowing how these things work. Summer 2023, okay? By then, there should be a printed copy. Okay.
It's like software, It's like software. We are iterating on it. It will take time.
It's never finished.
Exactly.
Okay.
Will you autograph my copy, Mauricio?
That's going to be expensive, but maybe. We can talk about it.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Okay. Well, when the book is finished, let's talk about it again. Okay, because we did one, I forget when it was. It was this year. We already had an episode on that. I forget even the number. It's been a while. But when it's finished, let's talk about it again. Cool.
I have learned so much from writing it because it's just a learning experience. So I think that I have enough to share, like to write another book on the experience and on the keynote. So I can make a book about writing a book and doing a keynote.
A book about the book. I like that. Cool. Okay. So what else is coming up for you, Whitney? I mean, you had the KubeCon, you had the keynote, like you did skydiving. Where do you take it from there? What's next on your list?
So I have, of course, enlightening episodes indefinitely, and those are all really fun. Personally, I'm going to a friend's wedding in India in December that I'm very excited about. And then Victor Farsik, who does the GitOps Toolkit channel, he and I are talking about collaborating.
Ooh.
But I don't want to say too much about what we have up our sleeves until it's a little further along. But I'm excited. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Okay. Exciting. What about conferences? Any other talks coming up or any blog posts, Whitney, or anything like that you would like to mention?
My next conference is CodeMash in Ohio. It's at a water park in Ohio in January.
Wow, okay. Won't it be too cold?
It's an indoor water park. I left out a very important adjective.
So then it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll be talking about Knative serving at that. I'll be doing I have a Knative serving talk with no slides. So I'll switch back and forth from diagramming how it works to going to the terminal and actually deploying an application and showing the experience.
What about you, Mauricio? I know that you have so many things, don't even remember them, right? You have to check your calendar. So hopefully we've given you enough time to do that. What's coming up?
No, 100%. I'm really hyped because I'm going to do a Cube Day Japan in Tokyo the 7th of December.
Wow, okay.
And I think that I'm really hyped because I will be talking about platforms pretty much along the same lines of the keynote. I'm hoping to be able to do all the demos that I did like more live and just going deeper into the technical side of things. But what gets me really hyped about this trip is that I'm taking my father with me, and it's his first time in Tokyo and in Japan.
Wow, okay.
And it's one of those places that on his own, he will never go there. So I, use this opportunity to get with me and just visit the city and see the craziness of Japan.
That's amazing. Okay, very nice. What about Christmas? What's happening for Christmas?
Christmas, I'm staying here in the UK, but for New Year's Eve, I'm going to South America, to Argentina and Uruguay to spend 15 days disconnected, trying to recover so I can come back and actually finish the book.
Very nice. Hopefully you'll keep Twitter switched off, because I know that is something that is constantly distracting you, right? There's always a message waiting for you, or a like, or a thumbs up, or something like that. Okay. What about you, Whitney? What does Christmas look like?
My brother and I are doing a vegan tour of India. So we'll be in India for Christmas and New Year together. So that'll be something I'll remember for the rest of my life, I think. But I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, if you're going to do a vegan tour, I can't imagine many more places better than India, with all the flavors and all the local cuisines. It's a very big place and a very interesting place. Delight to the senses, I hear.
Wonderful. I've never been, so I trust your judgments.
I only hear. I hear that. I mean, if the Indian Ocean counts as India, I can tell you it's very good. Okay. So what else would you like us to talk about? I mean, I don't do this often, but you have, between two of you, so much experience and you see so many things. So anything that you'd like to talk about in this context? Kubernetes, cloud native, tooling, people, anything interesting?
I can talk about like personal anecdotes more than I can riff off of your tooling talks, but I don't know what to bring up. But I think maybe it's interesting how Mauricio and I met each other.
Yes, Whitney. How did you meet Mauricio? Like, that's a very interesting combination. So let's start right there because I'm intrigued.
So I met some Knative people at KubeCon last year, and somehow Mauricio got onto my radar. I'm sure someone just retweeted one of his blog posts. And his blog, he had some general blog about the state of something or other. And so I happened to click into it and I read it and I was like, this guy seems nice and he seems like he knows what he's talking about. And I followed him. I had like a generally positive impression. And also, he's only an avatar. So based on his experience, I thought he was probably an old guy too.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
Nothing against old people.
Interesting.
I like them. But
very wise person, experienced, wise,
Yes.
seasoned. Okay.
And so I followed him and didn't think much of it. And then I'll leave it to Mauricio to tell his first impressions of when I came onto his radar.
Yeah, so it was pretty wild. So, you know that I'm always like submitting, proposals for different conferences. And there is this conference that I've been doing for the last 8 years or something, which is JVCN Conf in Barcelona. I have my parents living in Barcelona. So for me, that conference is a good, excuse to go to Barcelona, also to meet with the Java space there in Barcelona. They because they started like in the early 2010 with the conference, they have been growing a lot and they have been building a lot of expertise about building these events and creating a community, which is really nice. I've seen kind of like that progression. So it's always good to go and sync back with them and see what they are up to. So I was about to submit my presentation, my Knative presentation. I started working with the Knative project. I made some contributions and I had like some very interesting topic to discuss there. So I was about to submit my proposal when I noticed that there was someone already talking about Knative, and that was Whitney, who had submitted kind of like a presentation to the conference. And I said, okay, where does she work? She worked for the same company that I was working for. So I said, okay, let's go to Slack and reach out and say, hey, let's collaborate in the future because we are talking about the same things. So we should be doing things together, right? And that's when I reached out via Slack and say hi and introduce myself. And we started talking because it actually made a lot of sense to start collaborating. And at that point, I think that I received like the invitation for Enlightening because you were starting with that and you were looking for like new speakers and people to cover different topics.
It was great. He reached out to me, and to him, I was like, yeah, some person at his company talking about a technology he's a maintainer on. And he's like, who the heck is this person? But I didn't even realize, I was so green that I didn't even realize how much I was putting myself out there or representing the company or like needing to interact with the community as part of being in the public eye. So he contacted me and I had that experience of knowing who he is and admiring him and thinking he knows a lot of stuff. And so it was a little intimidating for me when he reached out, but he was also so friendly. I also had that impression that he was really friendly. And so him wanting to collaborate, I don't do this anymore, but back then in like February of this year, as soon as someone said, hey, Whitney, I want you to do this, I would very quickly say, I know nothing. Like I'm brand new here. I barely know anything. I don't do that. I know a lot actually now. So that was my first like, oh, I'd love to collaborate with you, but you're like 7 rungs ahead of where I am right now. So it's lovely to think about that moment and then think just like later the same year, we're going to do a keynote together and it's going to,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing combination. I mean, again, I told you, and I actually meant it. It was recorded, so everyone heard it. This was the best presentation that Mauricio gave. This keynote, okay? Really good stuff, okay?
But to be fair, Mauricio's presentations are awesome all the time. He does a great job of, his demos are really well put together and they get to the meat of what needs to happen and he explains things really well. So I maybe can make things even more simple than what he does, and then I can add the color and the flair and the fun and also have a deep understanding of what's going on. We're a great team, 100%, and we are yin and yang. Our skills dovetail really well. But I think Mauricio is a very solid presenter on his own, And I like to think I am too.
So, full disclosure, Whitney, we work together with Marie, so we're part of the same company. We worked even on Knative together. So the only reason why I'm joking with him is because, we have some history together, and he knows how to take it. No. He's amazing. Okay,
amazing.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, but to be honest, I think that we actually complemented very, very well together because of that. Like I tend to go, for example, one of the things that I quickly recognize, like my presentation style is I will add as much content as I can. I will just go full in very, very fast through the entire presentation. And for like a keynote, you can actually not do that. Like it's kind of like madness just to try to add too much content, right? So we need to spend a lot of time cutting things, making sure that the story was coherent and it actually made sense. And also we wanted to make sure that we sounded relaxed and not like rushing all the time. That's kind of like why we need to decide, for example, that the demos should be recorded instead of actually running the demos live, which was my dream, right? Like at the point, I really wanted to go ahead and just do the live demos. But at the end of the day, that gets in the way of how do you deliver the presentation and how it feels, like how the message feels at the end.
Yeah. And as a keynote, you don't have 40 minutes, right? So if something goes wrong, it can easily take up half your time. You only have 15, 16 minutes, something around that mark. And it has to be relaxed. It has to be memorable. It has to be a lot of things. And it was. I enjoyed it very much. I wish I had been there in person. I really do.
I think that something that actually helped us a lot is that we had people cheering in the audience, right? Like when we were just presenting, probably in the recording you cannot see it, but we had some people there in the audience, like actually cheering up and, reacting to kind of like the different, switches in mood and the jokes and all that stuff, which I think that for us as presenters, it gave us kind of like the right feedback just to even do it better.
That was a bit like your concert, Whitney, right? Or like your past performances. Did it feel similar to that? Did it feel familiar?
Yeah, and the experience of mostly what's in your eyes is light, so you're going off of the sound of things, of the audience, more than anything you can actually see. For sure, it's a similar feeling. This felt more vulnerable. When I was in a band, I sung harmonies and I played keys quietly in the background, like I wasn't front and center and the full focus of attention the way that it was with the keynote.
Nice. So as we are preparing to wrap this up, I'm wondering about a key takeaway for the listeners that stuck with us all the way to the end. Who would like to start?
What's the key takeaway? I mean,
so from our conversation, we had a great time together. What would you like our listeners to remember from this conversation? Something for them to take away, something to remember, whether it's the keynote, whether it's what we talked, something important, something that, they can, From that conversation, I remembered one thing, and this was it. Have platform teams, for example. I'm just giving examples. When you give a keynote, try to give it with Whitney, maybe, I don't know, or go to Whitney for presentations or anything you want.
So I think all the things we talked about technically are important, and the platform teams are important, but I think we made a good case for that in the keynote itself. Talking now, I think more the takeaway is more about community, and being kind to new people in the community. Like, you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. And really, even in the context of platform building, how much the interactions between people are really important.
Yeah, I would say that the more that we are maturing in the Kubernetes community and in the CNCF space, is like being welcoming to new people, having people like Whitney creating content for these audiences, explaining all this background and all these complicated topics and how all these crazy tools work together. It's really important. And I would go back to that mentorship space, right? Like, use these conferences, use these events to find people that you will look up to and learn from, and also make sure that you connect with people that it's newer in the industry, so you can also share your experiences and bring more people in. I think that's, for me, that's the most valuable part of these kind of conferences and events. And that's why I'm so hyped to go to Tokyo, which is a completely different community, a different society, a different culture, just to see if I can learn something from there, but also to see if I can mentor someone in that space.
Mauricio, you've been kind of a mentor to me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, You have been mentoring myself too. I've learned a lot.
if you want to learn something, try and teach it. And then you learn things about yourself. You learn, that's what they say. If you want to really understand something, try and teach it to someone that, maybe is not as experienced, that doesn't make certain assumptions or understand things easily, because that will force you to dig deep and maybe think differently than you would normally present it. So.
Exactly. And it's all about perspective, right? Like when I think about my experience with Whitney, and because we know each other for a short period of time, right? Like we are not friends forever, but we have been collaborating quite a lot. And you kind of see that even if I'm experienced in certain areas, I'm completely unexperienced in others, where Whitney is very experienced and she can share a lot of wisdom on that space. So sometimes when you feel that you are like underexperienced in some areas, you need to know that you probably have like a life experience that can bring some stuff into the table. And from that, everybody can learn and share their experiences.
I really like that. We each have our strengths and weaknesses. And, I think the more experience we get, we learn how to hide, I think, our weaknesses. We get very good at faking it, right? And it's not always the best strategy. Sometimes it's good to be vulnerable, to show, hey, I really don't know that thing. I forgot. Can we check it together? I don't understand. Actually, you know what? I never understood this thing. Whitney, can you help me diagram this so I understand it? Things like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. All right. Those are amazing takeaways. Thank you very much, both. I had a lot of fun. I wish we started recording a bit earlier, because we like really laughed like crazy before. I think it was like the best part. So yeah, next time I'll know how to do it. Yeah, I wish some of those jokes would have been there. They were so good. But yeah, anyways. So thank you both. I had a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to next time, because there will be next time. Promise. Thank you very much. And have a great end of the week. Have a great Christmas, New Year, because we are getting there. We're in the last month. Many of us are thinking about that. I definitely am. Have great travels, safe travels, and see you in the new year. Thank you both.
Thank you, Erhan. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Ship It. Check out our other podcasts for developers at changelog.com/master. You can connect with like-minded developers via changelog.com/community. Thank you, Fastly, for the worldwide low-latency changelog.com. Our listeners love those blazing fast MP3s. Your Firecracker VMs and WireGuard integration are really sweet. Flutter.io. That's it for this week. See you all next week, when we'll be talking to Narayan from Red Hat about site reliability engineering.